Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me here on the Royal House of Ra. I am your host, Amenhotep Khufu El Ra. Today's episode is episode 10, Dynasty 4. So, in the previous episode, episode 9, I had focused on Dynasty 3, and I did a little bit of Dynasty 4. So I'm doing the tail end of Dynasty 4 today. So we're going to talk about the last kings of Dynasty 4, and we're going to go into that. Also, I'd like to thank those who support the show and continue to do so. We're going to now Dynasty 4. I'm going to do Dynasty 5 on probably either Saturday or Sunday. It's going to be early. It's going to be like around 2 and I'll let you know. To be announced. So I'm going to do that, and we'll get that done. Now, like I mentioned, this period between Dynasty 3 and Dynasty 6 is considered the pyramid building age. This is the age where they were building pyramids. They started in the Dynasty 3 with the pyramid that was located in Saqqara. This pyramid was commissioned by the Pharaoh Doja, and the architect who helped create this pyramid was Imhotep. So the pyramids started from the beginning of the old kingdom. The old kingdom. So this period is known as the old kingdom. So the pyramids were, were created during the old kingdom period of ancient Kemet. So this is considered the pyramid age and the old kingdom. All right. So what we're going to do, we're going to get into this and move forward with this right now. So before I go forward, I'm going to show you the two kings, actually the two pharaohs, and then we go to discuss the last pharaohs of Dynasty 4. Okay, so let you take a look at that. These are the names of the two pharaohs. You see they cartouche next to their names. All right. Okay, so let's begin here. Now, before we begin, I'm going to mention here that, as I stated before, I'm not going to be playing any music in the intermission period. During the intermission period, that's a great time for you guys. That's usually going to be like a 3-minute break. So you take a break in between the show, because a lot of this is going to be a lot of information, especially when we go into Dynasty 5. You're going to, as we go further, you're going to have a lot of pharaohs, and a lot of pharaohs are in Dynasty 5. So it may be broken up into 2 episodes to cover that particular dynasty. The last dynasty, Dynasty 6, I believe, is about 4 to 5 pharaohs. So that's kind of short. It's very short because there's not too many pharaohs ruled in that dynasty. And then we'll go into Dynasty 6, then Dynasty 7, which was right around the intermediate period. And this was during the time where Kemet was going through its troubled time, and this is a lot of civil wars and infighting. So this is during the time of the intermediate period, during the political struggles in Dynasty 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so let's get into this. Khufu's successor was his short-lived son Djedefre, of whom little is known. It was presumably he who completed his father's burial at Giza and was especially responsible for the provision of his funerary boats. This very main significance is that he was the first king to adopt the name Son of Re. Moreover, for some unknown reason, he chose not only to construct his funerary monument some 5 miles, 8 kilometers north of Giza on a commanding plateau at Rosh, but also to revert to an earlier style of building. Instead of erecting his pyramid and then cutting down into a bedrock to construct a burial chamber, he followed the third dynasty practice of excavating a huge open trench terminating in a vertical shaft. It is extremely difficult because of the site's heavily denoted state to make much sense of the Djedefre complex. There was a crossway, but this ran north-south rather than the more usual east-west. No valley temple has been found, and only the rough ground plan of a mud brick mortuary temple was traceable with difficulty in the usual place on the east face of the pyramid. To the south, a deep pit may indicate the provision of a funerary boat. These aspects, together with the fact that very little remains of pyramids superstructures, imply that due to the king's relatively short reign, hardly more than a start was made on the overall plan and construction of the pyramid and its attendant buildings. From the French excavations at Abu Rosh in 1907 came a striking dark red corset head of the king wearing the Nem's headdress, a small statuette of his son, Sika, shown as a squatting scribe in the traditional posture, and the lower half of a statuette of the king with his wife. The quality and style of these three pieces, all now in the Louvre, Paris, show that the traditions of the Fourth Dynasty art was firmly established by this reign. About a mile to the south of Giza at Sawat el Aram is an unscribed structure that is very similar in construction to Djedefre pyramid, sharing the plan of a deep open trench. At the bottom of the deep shaft sunk into the floor was found an uninscribed oval granite sarcophagus. Two names have been recorded from the site. One is red paint on some blocks, may be read as Nebka. The other was that of Djedefre inscribed on a shish plaque. Neither serve as a strong attribution for the pyramid, although its construction technique would place it close to the date to that of Djedefre. It presumably belonged to an obscure king of the Fourth Dynasty, but the difficulty is to identify one and also where in the known sequence of Fourth Dynasty kings he might fall. Khafre, it was another of Khufu's sons, Khafre, builder of the second pyramid at and Great Sphinx at Giza, who succeeded Djedefre in about 2558 BC. Manetho identifies Khafre as Shepseskaf the second, and critics credits him with a reign of 66 years, which cannot be substantiated. Khafre did have quite a long reign, however, probably between the 24th year ascribed to him by the Turan royal canon papyrus and apparently confirmed by an inscription in the nearby Mataba tomb of Prince Menkaure, and 26 years. At any rate, his reign was long enough to produce a magnificent funerary complex at Giza. The country was prosperous under Khafre, as is evidenced by the mastaba tombs of the nobles of his court. Carved on the wall of one of them, that of Prince Menkaure, a king's son, is a will the only one of its kind known from the period. In it, he left 14 towns to his heirs, at least 11 of which three names are damaged, were named after his father Khafre. Menkaure legacy was divided up amongst his five heirs, but 12 of the towns were earmarked to endow the prince mortuary cult for his tomb. The second pyramid of Giza. The layout of Khafre's pyramid complex, valley, temple, crossway, mortuary, temple, and pyramid was to set the standard for the rest of the old kingdom royal tombs. The valley temple, set on the edge of the cultivation, is an impressively austere building, the largest old kingdom structure to survive other than the actual pyramids. It was built of local limestone, but the walls were then liddedly veneered with great slabs of red granite brought from the quarries at Aswan, 600 miles, not 965 kilometers away to the south. The pillars inside all manner of the same stone. Although the temple is no longer roofed, it is thought that light shaft above the pillars lit a series of perhaps as many as 23 diorites, shims, and alabaster seated statues, similar in style to the one found by Auguste Mariette in 1860, hidden in a pit just inside the entrance. This large than life-size polished Djedefre statue of Khafre, with the Horus falcon protecting the back of his Nim headdress, is one of the finest masterpieces of ancient Kemetan art. The Valley Temple played an important role in the funerary ceremonies of the dead king. Indeed, some rituals, particularly the purification ceremonies, seem to have been carried out on the roof beneath a tinted pavilion. From the interior of the valley temple and upward, sloping passageway leads out to the beginning of the crossway, which in turn leads to the upper mortuary temple on the east face of the pyramid. Little now remains of the mortuary temple. Khafre built his pyramid on slightly higher ground than his father, giving the illusion that his was taller than the Great Pyramid of Khufu. In fact, at 447.5 feet, 136 by point 4 meters, it was originally 33.5 feet, 10.2 meters smaller than the earlier neighbor, despite the fact that the Great Pyramid has lost its top 30 feet, 9 meters. The second pyramid is still shorter by about 3.5 feet, 1.1 meters. It does have the advantage, however, of retaining some of its original Tura limestone casting on the upper courses leading to the apex. In classical antiquity, it was widely believed that Khafre's pyramid was completely solid with no entrance or rooms within it. This was quite wrong, for it had not one entrance on the northern face of the building, as was the norm for Old Kingdom pyramids, but two on this side, one in the pavement skirting, and the second in the outer casting about 40 feet, 13 meters above the surrounding pavement and slightly off. Centered to the west, it was the pioneering Italian-born archaeologist Giovanni Balsoni who realized that the rubbish piled up against the pyramid's north face was higher than the entrance located on the north face of the Great Pyramid. Having obtained a Furman permit, he cleared away the debris and located the sloping upper entrance to the pyramid on 2nd March 1818. The passages descending from the two entrances joined up and led on to the burial chamber, almost centrally placed beneath the pyramidon and cut from the rock at ground level. The chamber's roof consists of large limestone blocks pitched at a gable angle reflecting that of the outer casing of the pyramid, 52 by 20 degrees, slightly sharper than the Great Pyramid, 52 degrees by 51. Belzoni was disappointed to find that medieval Arabs, following on after the ancient tomb robbers, had forestalled him, and all that was left in the burial chamber was a plain polished red granite sarcophagus sunk into the floor at the west end, which contained only a few animal bones. Belzoni left his name and the date of the entry writ large in lamp black on the south wall of the chamber, and also inscribed the same message in the granite block above the entrance he had found. It was some years later before the lower passageway was cleared back to its entrance in the outside pavement. The Great Sphinx Okay, before we go on, I'm going to show you some things here. You're going to see on the left side the diorite statue of Khafre, found in the Valley of the Temple, the controlled strength of the god on earth, which the king was, and the symbolism of Horus protecting and projection of the king are brilliantly achieved in the hard stone by yet another unknown and unnamed agent, committing genius craftsman, Cairo Museum, and then details of Khafre's feat flanked by his cartouche in the Cairo Museum. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do is show you these pictures, and then I have one of the Mastery Workshop of Heart stones, and then I have a picture showing you the plane of the Giza Plateau Pyramid Field. So you get a, and then you're going to see a progression of the pyramids from starting from Dozier's Saqqara Pyramid, uh, uh, Hunis and Senefre and Dulshur, and it goes on in Khufu and then Khafre, and then the third pyramid of Giza by Mina Kure. All right, so here's now on the project. This is Khafre and the footprint, and then on the bottom you can see the the progression of the pyramids, and then on right here you see the from a top view of the pyramid and its surroundings. Okay. Now the Sphinx is an integral part of the funerary complex of Khafre and was apparently carved from an outcrop of local limestone rock left after the quarrying of blocks for the nearby Great Pyramid of Khufu. It is a crouching human headed lion that represents Re Ha Harate, the sun god, at his eastern rising at dawn. Some recent nonsensical theories have suggested that the Sphinx is many thousands of years older than the pyramids, but there is no foundation for such fantasies. Its face is believed to represent Khafre, and as such is the oldest large-scale royal portrait known. The Sphinx is about 66 feet, 20 meters high, and 240 feet, 73 meters in length. For most of the last 4.5 millennia, it has been enveloped in sand. A large still before its chest records that in c. 1419 BC, the young prince Thutmose, later to be Thutmose IV, cleared away the sand that engulfed it. In recent years, since it is no longer protected by its sand covering, deterioration has been very noticeable, especially from rising groundwater, and a large piece of rock weighing 30 kilos fell from its right shoulder in February 1988. This was restored and a full recording and conservation program begun. The necropolis at Giza was to be completed by Khafre's son Menkaure, who came to the throne in about 2332 BC. Now, I'm going to show you the image of the last. I'll show you the of the last four kings of Kemet. I mean, of the fourth dynasty. And there's a portrait of um, Menkaure on the side of it. So you're going to see you see the names of the two pharaohs, that cartouche next to them, and then the image of Menkaure on the side there. Okay. Okay, Menkaure, also known as Mycerinus, Mycerinus, succeeded his father in about 2532 BC. According to legend, Menkaure's benevolent rule was an affront to the gods. They had decreed that Kemet would suffer 150 years of hardship, and this had indeed been evident during the reigns of Khufu and Khafre, who were said to have been particularly harsh during the building of their pyramids. Menkaure, by contrast, adopted a much more benign attitude, which does seem to be reflected in his portraits, reopening temples and repelling many of the oppressive measures of his predecessors, and thus floated the dictate of the gods. The deities therefore decree through the oracle of Butu, an ancient capital in the delta, whose patron goddess was Wedjet, the sacred cobra or Uranus that protected Pharaoh, that Menkaure would only enjoy a reign of 6 years, after which the oppression would return. Menkaure considered this an unwarranted stricture and determined to overcome it. He ordered that as night fell, candles were to be lit, and he continued to live by day and night, in theory expanding his reign from 6 to 12 years. The gods, however, were not to be denied. Menkaure, the legend said, died after the 6 stipulated calendar years. Menethil ascribed to Menkaure's a reign of 63 years. In fact, we now believe he ruled for 28 years, which should have been long enough to build a monument much larger than his small pyramid at the south end of the Giza Plateau. With an original height of 228 feet, 70 meters, and now a mere 204 feet, 62 meters, the so-called third pyramid is less than half the height of the Great Pyramid of Khufu. The stunned size has integral many commentaries and various explanations have been proposed, the most likely being that its small scale resulted from internal political problems, perhaps the strain on human and other resources caused by the huge building projects of his father and grandfather. The third pyramid of Giza. Although the classical authors were agreed in ascribing the third pyramid at Giza to Menkaure. This was only confirmed only in the 19th century, 1837 to 1838, when Colonel Howard thus found the king's name written in red orc or the ceiling of one of the three queens' subsidiary pyramids in Menkaure complex. The lower courses of the outer casing of the pyramid were of red granite from Aswan, much of which survives today. The upper casing blocks were of gleaming white Tura limestone, a striking contrast. Although the pyramid was eventually 228 feet 70 meters in height, even this was an expansion because the original plan had been for a structure only about 100 feet 30 meters tall. This plan included an entrance passageway on the north face just above ground level, but when the structure was expanded to its present form, the entrance was covered up. A new entrance was thus made on the north face, and what was originally intended as the burial chamber now became simply an antechamber. Antechamber. All right. Okay. When Viscera entered the burial chamber, he found against the wall an uninscribed and litless basalt sarcophagus, which was carved with the early Old Kingdom pattern of the articulated palace facade. Inside it was a wooden anthropode coffin bearing the cartouche of Menkaure. The shape of the coffin was wrong for the period because coffins were rectangular in the Old Kingdom. It would appear, therefore, that the coffin and almost certainly the carved sarcophagus itself were pious restorations carried out during the Sate period in the later 6th and 5th century BC. Excuse me. Both items were shipped to England, destined for the British Museum. Fortunately, they traveled in separate ships. The coffin reached the museum, but the ship carrying the sarcophagus sank in a storm in 1838, shortly after leaving Leghorn. Efforts made in recent years using highly sophisticated technical equipment have failed to locate the ship. From 1905 to 1927, the Harvard University Boston Museum expedition, directed by George A. Reisner, worked on the pyramid site, clearing the valley and mortuary temples. Reisner found some truly remarkable slate statues in the valley temple that included the splendid uh, triad groups of Menkaure accompanied by the goddess Khafre. Given the features of his queen Kamer, Kamer, Kamernepe II, and a Num deity, and also a magnificent dyad statue of the royal pair. Curiously, far more statues survived of Menkaure than of his fourth dynasty predecessors. In inverse proposition to the size of their pyramids. Although the representations have the typical ethereal, godlike look of the Old Kingdom. They are portraits of the king, notable for his snub nose and slightly bulbous eyes. For complete examples of the king standing with a numb deity survived as fragments of others. Perhaps all the nuns were intended to be represented in a great series of slate triads. The quality of carving of this difficult stone is very high, as is the finish where it occurs. Although the majority are in various stages of completion, leading credence to the story preserved in the legends that Menkaure met his death suddenly. Menkaure's chief queen, Khmer Nepti II, was the occupant of the larger of the three subsidiary pyramids associated with his pyramid. Her impressive granite sarcophagus is still in the burial chamber. She was the eldest daughter of Khafre by his wife Kamernepe the First, who was a daughter of Khufu by an unknown queen. Clearly, the royal family was bound by very strong blood ties. Okay, so I'm going to show you an image of Menkaure and his wife is on the top, and then there's an image of alabaster head of a king from the Valley Temple to the third pyramid. This might yet another representation of Menkaure. Also on the right, you're going to see a triad representing Menkaure wearing the white crown. He obviously look completely African here. And then the flank on his right by the goddess Hether with sun disk and cow's horns headdress, and on his left by the purification of the Hether's name with her known sign on her head. Both ladies have the features of Menkaure's queen, Kamere Nemtet II. This was in the Cairo's museum. So I'm going to show you right now. Now you see where the three triads with Menkaure and the goddess Hethra, and then on the upper corner there you see Menkaure with his wife. Okay, we're going to take a 3-minute break here, and when we return, we're going to go and discuss about the last pharaoh of the fourth dynasty, which was Shepseskaf. We're going to talk about him, and that would be the end of the fourth dynasty. So let's take a brief break here, and then we'll come back and then talk about the last pharaoh of this dynasty, the fourth dynasty. This is a good time to get up and stretch, use the bathroom, get something to drink. You may want to get something to munch on. So this is a good time to do it now. So let's come back in 3 minutes. It's 4:39 p.m. now. So we're looking at 4:42 p.m. to return. Okay, so take this time to take your break. Mm. Okay, let's begin here. Excuse me. So now we're going to end it with the last king of the fourth dynasty, which is Shepseskaf. Okay, Menkaure's eldest son by Khafre II, Prince uh, Kunre, did not succeed him, presumably because he predeceased his father. A small stone statue in the Boston Museum represents the prince in the squatting position of a scribe, kilt stretched between his knees to support his writing board. This was to become the classic pose for scribal statues of nobles in the next dynasty. Instead, the king was followed by Shepseskaf, another son by an unknown queen. He was short. His was a short reign of only 4 years. The fortunes of the kings of the fourth dynasty were on the wane after Khufu's magnum opus and began to slide rapidly downhill towards the end. This is very evident in Shepseskaf monument. He moved away from the Giza plateau, returning to the old third dynasty burial ground at South Saqqara, where he erected a most curious tomb known as the um, Mastaba El Forum Pharaoh's bench. It originally had the shape of a large rectangular sarcophagus, but is now much denuded. His half sister, Kanuktora, daughter of another unknown queen of Menkaure, chose to have a similar style monument, but hers is back at Giza. She married Yusukov, who became the first king of the next dynasty. Okay, so that is it for Dynasty 4. Now we're going to go into Dynasty 5. There's about, let me see here. 4, 8, 9. It's about 9. 9. Yeah, it's about 9 kings, 9 pharaohs of the fifth dynasty. So let me just show you that a little briefly so you can see. These are the names of the 5 pharaohs of the fifth dynasty. You can see the cartouche beside them. So we're going to go into that, discussing the fifth dynasty. And the sixth dynasty only had about 4 pharaohs. They were kind of short. They didn't have too many pharaohs at that point in the sixth dynasty, but they had great pharaohs. They had Pepe II, Pepe the First, T, and Menere All right, so they had some great pharaohs at that dynastic period. They also had them in the fifth as well. All right, so we're going to end um, today's show. I hope everyone enjoyed the show and look forward for Dynasty 5. That would be the next show. That would be episode 11. So thank you all for tuning in. Continue your support this show. Either you subscribe or like. Have a good afternoon, and we will see each other again when we discuss Dynasty 5. Take care. God bless.